Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. We've got Mike Carey with us tonight, candidate for the at-large seat, Salt Lake County Council.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's nice to have you back. I kind of wanted to get an update of what's going on. That's a pretty big race. I mean, how big is your district?
So the district is 1.2 million people.
1.2 million.
In Salt Lake County. There are a little over 500,000 voters, registered voters in the county. And I believe the last time
that's bigger than a congressional seat.
Yes. And but I don't have nearly the square mileage I need to cover as those candidates do. But it's been going great. I've got a tremendous amount of loyal volunteers that are really out there pounding the pavement. As I told you earlier before the podcast, we've got close to 13,000 door hangers out deployed. We're hoping to get double that by the end of next week. I've got close to 100 people walking the street, interacting with voters. We haven't even prioritized the threes and the fours and the primary work, because a lot of the people that have been reaching out to my campaign are really disaffected voters. I'll give you a great example. I met with an 80-year-old man that looked like he was 68. I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So
you want the secret.
Yeah. So I met an 80-year-old man in Midvale the other day that, it really touched my heart. And he said, I read up on you. I watched some of your interactions in your podcast and listened to the interactions you've had on the radio, and you're the first Republican that's motivated me to get out and vote in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So that's pretty cool. And that's not the only story like that. I've met a lot of people that have been really disaffected.
This is a really important race. I hope people show up because, Salt Lake County is drifting to purple, right? And we really, a lot of the sections are definitely blue, and, especially in the city, but we that's kind of a beachhead we need to protect.
It is. And, I've shared this before at cottage meetings and town halls and anytime I interact with voters where, I've lived this experience before where a red place goes blue.
Yeah. Okay.
And so first of all, the county there's a broad range of diversity of thought and beliefs in the county. Right. All right. And that's fine. Okay, but we're not at war with one another. We're not trying to take the beachhead,
right?
And it's really a shame that it kind of devolves into that occasionally. That's why I kind of poke fun at some of the fringe issues, frankly, to show how really meaningless they are or can be in the day-to-day lives of Salt Lake County residents. And I've tried to stay within the middle of talking about what are the jobs that we need in the county that will allow our children and grandchildren to be able to afford to live here, because that doesn't exist right now.
Right.
We've got a lot of people that are housing insecurity, and even folks that live here or live in Salt Lake County that are wondering, how am I going to be able to afford rising property taxes, rising cost of living, add to that the inflation we're seeing at the federal level caused by federal monetary policy, all those things. And so we talk about, when we discuss careers, or we talk about infill development, there's so many people moving to Utah. The growth is, we have to share the pain and the growth. Like, growth is not supposed to be painful.
Right.
All right. But people in Riverton, people down in Bluffdale, people down in Harriman, they should really have a say in what happens in their community. And some of the concerns we see happening with some of the words out of the governor's mouth and even some of the legislature about, passing higher density zoning requirements for cities and towns. That's troublesome, and that concerns them. So, those are the Main Street issues that I've been talking about, and my spot on the council, how it could defend that.
It's interesting when you have Salt Lake County. Most of the county is incorporated now, right? So you have individual cities, and a lot of the services, zoning, and other things are done by the cities, right?
Well, they farm out some still to the MSD, the Municipal Services District, because they don't have a revenue, frankly, to set up their own systems yet, right? So they provide the MSD in some cases, for lack of a better term, is subcontracted by the cities and towns to pick up those services, and that's okay. But with House Bill 330, which I believe is now law, which eliminates the remaining islands within the islands of unincorporated areas in Salt Lake County by 2027, it's pretty much going to leave the mine on the west side and the areas of the canyons on the east side. So it completely changes the consumer base. When you look at the taxpayer as a consumer of services, it completely changes that consumer base from what the county council and those county services were originally set up to provide in years past. So we're going to go through this evolution where county government, just by the nature of the clientele, should be shrinking.
Right.
But
yet the budgets are growing.
Oh, it's almost it's just under $2 billion. We have 4,500 employees, and it's not lost on me that shrinking government means that people might lose their county jobs. Those jobs are still required because we're still growing. It's just it might be with a city and a town,
right,
or a town.
And at some point, someone's got to motivate that movement, though, right, away from the county to the cities for some of these services that.
Absolutely. When you anytime you have multiple layers of anything, whether it's in government or private business, in the public sector we call it bureaucracy, right? In the private sector we call it administration. Well, administration costs are never really productive costs. They're not revenue generating, right? They're revenue consuming, and so I think there's a huge opportunity to get lean and efficient. Really evaluate what services are core to the county as legislated or as delegated by the legislature and state law, and then really take a look at the parts of the county services that are non-statutory but still provide high value to the residents and businesses of Salt Lake County. But then there's this third category where we've got a fair number of feel-good programs in there, good idea committees, that have thrown some even small amounts of funding. But when you have a lot of those, they add up.
Right.
And we need to be careful about the growth of the administration at this middle layer where, which is county government, where it's kind of exploring into areas that are far outside its purview.
Right. Well, and that's something I think that conservatives are very mindful of, right? I mean, there's a proper role for the government, and government tends to move in directions where probably better left up to individuals
or the private sector.
Yeah.
And that's a very valid point because there is this notion though that happens in any organization that exists under a certain structure or org chart, if you will, or with a certain set of processes where there's this kind of stagnation that happens. And so with this massive sea change where we will have literally zero direct consumers that we have to provide some services to in the next 5 years, even if 27 has somewhat of a lag into 28 or 29 because some of the cities and towns are not really set up for it yet or don't have the infrastructure in place, I could see a turnover period. But we've got to be mindful of the fact that because that consumer base is changing dramatically, like I said, going to zero, we need to really take a step back and say, how do we even provide this service anymore? Or if we are going to provide this service, how do we do it in a more lean and efficient manner?
Yeah. We're going to take a break.
Sure.
Okay. And then we'll be right back. Hey Siri, how do I get to the state capitol?
John, the fastest way to get to the capitol is to make a lot of empty promises, to get help from special interest groups and endorsements from politicians. You will also need to buy a better suit.
That's not going to work for me, Siri. You need to find another way.
John, listen to me. If you're going to win your race, you will need to play the political game. You also need to use more hairspray and buy a golden retriever. Also, a new phone case would be nice.
That's enough of this.
John, are you there? Did you just leave me on the road? Fine. Keep your principles, John.
My name's John Johnson. I'm not running to be part of a system, and I don't owe anyone special favors. I'm running to listen to and work for you. I'm running to get results. Welcome back to PoliticIt. We've got Mike Carey here, County Council at-large seat. Salt Lake, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the dynamics. I mean, we talked about the idea that, that county is really moving more purple. And, there's a beachhead there, and it's something that Republicans need to be aware of. And it's not just Republicans, I don't think, because the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has really kind of taken over.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been called MAGA on Twitter recently because I'm talking about, certain books that maybe should be not even be banned, but they should be behind the counter,
right?
At a library, and yet the attacks are relentless. And I've gotten some lovely messages on Facebook, labeling me this phobe and that phobe, and it's like, listen, all right, if I hate to break it to you, but gay marriage got legalized in 2015, and most people nowadays don't care who you love.
Yeah.
All right, just be whatever makes you happy. And do you, okay? But the second you start crossing a line when you start trying to indoctrinate my kids in the school, and we've seen this.
Yeah,
we've seen this at my kids' school. I have 3 kids. They've all been on the receiving end of that to some degree or another. And I've heard other examples of where it's worse. But with respect to the county is still predominantly a conservative county. And when I say, I've seen this movie before. We saw it in Maryland when we lived there from 2000 to 2011 before we moved to Utah. I grew up with it in New Jersey. All right, we've seen it happen in California, where this tremendous concentration of power and wealth around a major metropolitan area usually winds up calling the shots. It doesn't take long before that winds up calling the shots for everything in the state. And so, one of the points I've been driving home that's had a very, very, very enthusiastic response from around the state is that, once everybody gets through this primary and is done beating the heck out of other Republicans trying to get on the November ballot, the Salt Lake County Council at-large race becomes, if not the most important race in the state, certainly in the top 2. All right, because the Democrats are not running anybody that's a major threat at any of those big races. The governor, all the state races, including the governor.
Right.
The Senate race, the 4 congressional races, okay, they're going to be on cruise control going into November. And what I've talked to conservative groups about in other counties, Washington County, Weber County, Davis County, Utah County, is saying, hey guys, when it comes to the fall election, you all need to focus your attention on Salt Lake County, because if you want these progressive policies to kind of slow down or stop, all right, and we can keep them to confined to the areas that people want to vote on those issues, that's fine. Okay, but we have to treat the Salt Lake County race as the single most important race in the state. This needs to be our Alamo. We have to rally around this and prevent. It's not a 51% majority in the state that turns the state blue. It's like 30. Right. Okay, it's like 28. It's somewhere in there, and we saw it in Maryland when I lived there.
When we're sleeping, and you know what? Can you give me a single example where a major city is better off because Democrats are in charge?
No, I can't. All right, and look at what's happened in Salt Lake City. In Salt Lake City, when I moved here 13 years ago, it was fantastic. I worked there the last 4 years, and between the homeless problem, the lack of enforcement with the DA's office down in the county, on these are crimes. Okay, right. Some of these things are crimes, and you use any excuse you want. There's a culture of enablement that's taken over. All right, and how homelessness is handled in Salt Lake City is totally different than how it's handled in West Valley City. I've talked to the cops in both areas. The cops in West Valley City, the first thing they do, hey, are you okay? Can I call your family? And they try to do, prison is not the way to solve homelessness. I mean, everyone recognizes that. So, but
most of the chronically homeless, quite frankly, are addicted.
Yes,
it's an
addiction. You. I was just going to say that. Yeah. I would venture to guess that 70 to 80% have some form of mental illness, exacerbated or caused by addiction or alcoholism. So instead of this housing first policy that we've adopted, which is also a failure everywhere it's been tried in the country. All right, maybe we should focus our sights on sobriety, and that's going to take a while. Okay, I know. Representative Lyman has talked about this, just last night in the debate about, we need to focus on the mental health services, and if that means we have to grow that to end the recidivism, and on the other hand, you also have to eliminate this culture of enablement that's happening from some of our elected officials. And so, that relates to the county as a whole, where we have 1.2 million people. There's roughly 230,000 people in Salt Lake County. There's another 900 and some odd thousand that are in the rest of the county scratching their heads, just wondering when this wave of bad ideas is going to approach their shores. And we need to put a stop to that. And frankly, we do need to support the people in Salt Lake City that are frustrated with some of the policies, but they also need to hold their government officials accountable at the city council and in the mayor's office to say enough is enough.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole idea of pushing, these Alinsky tactics they use to push this, the idea, these are right wing, this is MAGA, and quite frankly, Joe Biden and the Democrats have gone so far left. They've left our kids. They've left our families. They've left sanity.
Yeah.
For heaven's sakes.
It's really a shame. It's really a shame. This is not the Democratic Party of my youth.
Right.
I know my mom was a Kennedy Democrat, and it's moved so far away. And God forbid you call them out on it. You're immediately, you're labeled a hater.
These are not classical. These are not liberals, like the Kennedy Democrats were, right? Liberals. I mean, even at the university, when you have liberals who they believe in reason.
Yeah.
Right. And
healthy debate, exchange of ideas.
And what's happened is the progressives have taken over.
Yeah.
And a lot of these views are just insane.
I don't want to guess to put a number on it, but there are far too many people, I would say, in the last 15 years, and I hold the higher education system accountable for this, and even somewhat the public education system, that have been conned into thinking that activism is the sole purpose in life to drive change. And we need to get away from that. Proof through results is what drives change. If you have a different idea on a solution than I have, let's talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's have a debate.
Let's have a debate. And you know what? We're probably going to get behind. We're probably going to find that third right answer I talk about often, where it's maybe if each one of us has 10 points, your 3 work, my 3 work, and then we found 4 over here we weren't even talking.
Well, especially when we're talking at the city level.
Oh, absolutely.
This idea of,
on the county level too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that local governments. A lot of them used to be nonpartisan simply for that reason, right?
Makes a lot of sense.
Because local politics is different.
Yeah.
Right? And, to push and I would say a progressive agenda that tries to upend, this idea of you mentioned about activism, right? I think the American public is getting tired of it.
Absolutely. You're seeing the pendulum swing back. In a lot of areas. You're seeing it with the whole transgender movement, for example, in sports. A lot of pushback on the Title IX changes recently, which the Biden administration didn't have to do that. That was a really bad move on their part, and it's not going to hold up. You're seeing it swing back with, I think it was the American Pediatrics, some group of pediatric doctors recently came out against the gender-affirming care and transitioning children. You're seeing it, frankly, at my kids' age group, which is, 14 to 22, where they've been told most of their youth that they're privileged or they can't relate or they have inherent biases or in some cases that they have generational trauma.
That's that progressive movement.
Right. That is a progressive move to try to make everyone feel like there's a victim and there's an excuse for their own failures or inadequacies. Instead of, maybe you should go work on those things. Go get some reps. I always used to joke with my kid when he was little and he was taking guitar lessons. You got to get 2,000 hours on this thing before you get good. So I started playing a song that he was trying to learn, and I learned it better than he did. Well, that motivated him to want to, beat his old man.
Right.
But you got to get the reps. You got to, in anything you do, you got to get the reps.
Yeah. They say 10,000 hours.
Yeah. Is that what it is?
Yeah. to be an expert, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And a lot of these things give people excuses.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than motivate them to be better.
Absolutely. And it's easy to use it. It's easy when you have new excuses being created almost all the time.
So Mike, we're about out of time.
Sure.
So why don't you make a pitch to the voters? You know, this is coming down pretty quick.
Yeah, we're down to less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
it's pretty
make one last pitch.
I'm Mike Carey. I'm running for Salt Lake County Council at large. If housing cost and population growth and density in our rural areas and certain agendas being driven in our schools are concerns of yours, then I am your candidate for this race. All right, for far too long, we have been allowing our compassion to be weaponized against us. And it's time that we draw a line in the sand and get back to reasonable, rational discussion. So with less than 2 weeks left, I ask that you vote for me in the June 25th primary. And if you want more information about my campaign, you can go to www.mikecarey4cc.com. And I appreciate everyone's support. Thank you.
Very good. Mike Carey, thanks for coming in. We'll see you guys next week.